So the first one we're going to go after is going to be a studio shot. And what we'll do is we'll just try to recreate something that's been done by another photographer. That way we could kind of go over the basics of how to recreate real life lighting with CGI. Now, there's two ways. The one real way is you use bounce cars and you use something like, a hot light and you directionally aim it at the wall and then it bounces off and you project it onto the car and then you go in Photoshop, you clean things up. Another way is utilizing the fact that we are in CG and we could take shortcuts, and that's mapping those types of lights from a wall just onto a directional light source. So one thing we'll do is start off by creating a studio cyc wall. Now this is where we're going to go over kind of like some modeling aspects of it. So what we'll do is we'll create a plane in the top view. So go to the Create tab, click on Plane, and just drag and drop a big plane like so. Press F4 to turn on the wireframe. Okay, I like how this is looking, just a nice little grid. All right, so now we're going to add a modifier, which if you go into the perspective, or really any view, and you go to Convert to Editable Poly, this is what we want. We want it to be an editable poly. Press F4. Press 2 to go into edge mode. And just double click on this backside edge and that'll make a selection of the whole strip. Go to side view, press F4. Hold shift and just drag it out like so. Drag and drop. Drag and drop. And all I'm doing is I'm just holding shift and dragging. And this is kind of just creating this little cycle. As you can see, every time we let go and click and drag again, it keeps adding more squares, which are called polys in CGI. So now what we'll do is go right here. We'll um we'll do a connect and let's see, because I have this as a shortcut. But let's see, loop tools, and I believe it's going to be connect. Nope, that's not it. I forgot where this actually lives. Swift loop, is this it? Yep. So what we want to do is we want to go to the edge mode and then click on Swift loop. And what this does, it just creates a nice cut in between all these. So we're just subdividing it manually. Reason why we're doing that is we're going to let these edges like so, or these vertices, to kind of start rounding it off the backside of the cyc wall. There we go. So just like that. All right, so now we're going to add a turbo smooth modifier, which my shortcut is W. There we go. So now as you can see, we have a rounded off cyc wall, and this is probably way bigger than in real life, or if you were to find one in real life this big, you'd cost a lot of money. So the next thing we'll do is we'll add a bend modifier on top. Do X 90 90. So we'll go to 180. There we go. So now we have a perfectly rounded cyc wall. Now what we'll do is convert to editable poly. Go to edge mode again. In the top view, or any view really, you want to select this edge and then hold control, select this outside edge, and then click on bridge. And as you can see, this just connected the gap. Now what we'll do is the same process from here to here. Press bridge, here to here, press bridge. And then what we'll do is go to this border tool. Just click here and this selects all the inside border edges. And as long as it's closed off like we have here, this is what we want. And then press cap. There we go. So now we just filled that in. Now press edge, double click on this outside edge. We have that selection made. Hold shift, drag it out once, then keep holding shift, drag it out some more. And there we go. Now we're going to turbo smooth this, add another one. And now there we go. Now we have a perfectly rounded, really large studio. Now I'm just going to press C to center pivot point and just drag this back a little bit. There we go. Now we'll reset our material editor. And the shot that I want to recreate is from Frederic. I'm a big fan of his photography, and it's going to be this BMW shot. So we'll have a wet reflection on the side, we have a soft reflection on the top, a soft reflection on the side, and a little bit of directional shadow hit, and then we'll see about adding some caustics, see how that plays out for us. So first things first, if we take a look at this, the background, now it could have been done in post, but to me it looks like a very dark gray. So to do that, we'll change this material to a Chrono Legacy material. We'll name it background. Take this object, do exclamation mark, cyc. And we'll we'll explain why that's important. Then drag and drop this one on there. Change this gray to a dark gray. There we go. Now go to the Create tab, Camera, Physical. We're going to create a camera in the top view and just go to Physical. All right. And now, like in real life, this is a real camera. So focal length, we'll change it. I think 42 or 35 is default. Let's just change it to 55 if you haven't already. And then what we also want to do is press 8, and it sets up this little physical camera exposure. We want to change it to none. There we go. Now what we'll do is just press this button down here, and this allows us to zoom in and out. And you just press and hold, and you could zoom. And then if you look at the top view, you can see what the camera is doing. So zoom. Now what I'm going to do is hold Control, press R. This is the rotation shortcut, and you could rotate around. Now if you want to do very slow, precise rotations, hold Left Alt, click and drag, and this gets you to rotate but at a lot slower pace. Now I'm just pressing holding the middle mouse button to just kind of pan around and position the composition of the shot. So there we go. I'm going to zoom out some, let more environmental bleed. And now our current workspace is set up to be 1920 by 1080. So press F10 and we will change that to custom. Leave it at 1.5 if it's not already. And then we'll just do about 4,000 pixels. So that way we just have a nice res image. All right, now what we'll do is turn this off because we want it pitch black because we will use our own studio lighting, like so. All right, so now it's time to start kind of creating the lighting. So what we'll do is take another look at this, kind of get an idea of what we're going for. All right, so on the top, just click on Corona Interactive to start it up. So the first thing we'll do is create our directional light source. So go to the Create tab, the light, Corona light, change it to disk. In the back left, we're just going to create a disk. And then it's a matter of how you want to recreate it in terms of reality. So, I mean, a hot light, what is it, about 3 feet? So if we're doing diameter, 1.5 feet, something like that. We're going to do targeted. And yeah, so I forgot to mention, click the targeted button. Now in the top view, right click and then click on select light target. And this is the target of the light source. So we're just going to aim it at the car. So instead of manually having to rotate the hot light, we could just click the targeted and position it like so. Now we're just going to right click, select light, change it, the intensity to 50. That's not doing it yet, 200. So there we go. We're starting to get some of that beautiful directionality. Now, looking at Frederic's shot, the shadow isn't as long. I have this on my other computer open, so that's why I'm kind of referencing it without opening it. So we're just gonna move this light source a little higher, like so. And I don't want to fill the whole environment like we have here. I kind of want to focus just on the car. This is where this directionality comes in. We'll bump this up to about 0.6. So as you can see, because we're focusing our light source at a certain area, it becomes way more intense regardless of the intensity we're using. It's because now it's fixated on just putting all that energy of the light into that fixed area. So now that we have that directionality on, we could tone down the power, so 50, and then just kind of rotate it around some, like so. Here we go. We might want to bring it closer to the cars because looking at Frederick's shot, now again, a lot of this could have been done in post, but it's kind of like fixated in this area, not so much on the outsides, which could be, just tweaked in post, but we'll just do it in CG because why not? All right. Now what we'll do is we have our base. We'll turn this down to 20. So it's not as intense. There we go. All right, I want to turn the wheels a little bit just to get that exciting visual. So we'll just open up our layers tab, click on rig, and then go in the top view, select this helper right here, press A, this turns on angle snap, and we will just rotate it 10 degrees. Go to this other one, do it 10 degrees, like so. Now, to help CGI look realistic, typically data comes in where the wheels are perfectly flat and straight. While this is great for rigging purposes, when creating the shots, you want a little bit of that real life element. So what we'll do is on this select and manipulate, you just right click on it. And now we could add a little bit of a negative camber. So we'll just do, I think like 1.5 in the back. and then go to this other side and type in negative 1.5. So there we go. So now we have a little bit of camber in the rear, gives it a little more realism, making sure it's sitting underneath the ground. There we go. And what I'll do is save this as a new file, Lambo Studio. That way we don't lose anything if it does crash for whatever reason. And we also don't override our data prepped file with this one. All right, so now we have our hero light source done. So the next thing is to add that wet reflection. So in the link below, it's in our main files folder. I created 3 HDRI lights. These are 32-bit EXRs that are just created in Photoshop, real quick, real simple. We have our HDRI sphere, which is a circle. We have our square, which is a square with soft edges, and we have half, which is that half wet reflection, which we will use to create this type of reflection. Now with the Lambo design being a little different than this car, it's obviously not going to look the same, but we'll do what we can. Prior to that, we'll go to scene materials, LED headlight, daytime running light. We'll swap those like we've done in our previous version. So we turn the lights on. They might be a little too intense, so let's just go to 1, 2, so 1.5. And then I will do the same thing with the top light. So we'll swap those out. So change that to like 5, 8. So there we go. We have our lights on. Now we could do the same thing for the tail light and see what happens in the back end of the car. So we're not really seeing much, so it doesn't really matter whether it's on it or not, but we'll fake it. We'll add some our own glare back there to give us some little warmth. Now, again, I'm using Frederic's as a reference, but we're not going to make it match apples to apples. It's a different car. Lights are going to work differently and visually look different from car to car. And also, this is just like a quick run through. If you really want to sit there and try to copy it apples to apples, you're going to have to spend a lot more time and also try to use the same car as he did. So going into the side view, so I'm going to go here, press L for left, press F3 for wireframe. I'm just going to create a rectangular light source like so. And then in the top view, just move in the back and then just rotate it some. So there we go. Now what I want to do for now is turn off directionality so that way I can see it completely. And the other thing what I'm going to do is I want to turn off this hero light just so it's not getting in the way. I want to look at one light at a time and then turn them back on like a puzzle. So if you click on light lister, it opens up this light lister and this Corona light. We'll turn it off and we will also name it hero light. I have no idea why it's doing this annoying backwards thing. So hero underscore light. So we'll just do this one, side wet light. All right, so now what we have to do is load in our half grad. So what we'll do is for no map, click on that, click Corona bitmap, and then with that, drag and drop this into a material slot, make sure it's instance. This window comes up, this comes up, paste the directory of the lights, and we'll just do a gradient half. So as you can see, this is exactly what it is. It's half a gradient with very soft edges and an alpha to make it transparent. All right, so what we want to do is click on visible directionality or visible directly, and you can see we have the gradient and we have a little bit of a over trim on top. So to fix that, for tiling, just do 0.98 to 0.98. That gets rid of that. All right, you want to make sure you don't have it visible, and you also want to make sure this is unchecked, include other lights, because what would happen, think of it like a wall. If you have this checked, you can have a wall, and then this light is going to cast a shadow from this light, and we don't want that. So we're just going to uncheck that. All right, so now that we have that light source there, we're just going to kind of move it around and see what makes this car look beautiful. How close we want it, how far away, how much of a rotation, how high or low off the ground we want it. So I like what we get here. When we put it lower to get the door, it becomes a little distracting. We could see what it looks like. It's not really doing us any favors, so we'll just raise it up. So that way, what happens is we get it on the body, but then on the door it becomes more of like a belt line reflection. So I'm just rotating this. And the reason why I'm able to rotate at the angle of the right directionality is I have the rotation type set to local. If you have it to view, it's always a perfectly squared up rotation object. If you have a local, you could rotate it based on the directionality of the light. So then we're just gonna scale the light up just to get it a little larger, like so. Move it down, rotate it this way, move it out. So there we go. Let's see what would happen if we lift it up even more. So that's kind of working out. All right, so the next thing we'll do is kind of tone down the intensity to like 15. And let's see what happens if we turn on directionality. Sometimes directionality makes us lose the actual light reflecting on the car. So zero point 0.5. So zero point 0.4 seems to still work. 0.3, 0.35. And then the other thing what we can do is, let's see what this will do. If we exclude the sidewall, and that's why we named it with the exclamation mark, so it's always on top of the list. So if we click exclude, as you can see now the light doesn't affect the ground. So that's kind of like if you were strobing the shot, you strobe your background, then you strobe the car and you composite it. In CG, we're able to do it all in once without having to retouch that element, which is nice. So now we're just going to turn that on. All right, so now we have our wet reflection, we have our car light, we have our solid sharp shadow. So we're starting to kind of get closer to this. Now what we'll do is we'll create the soft light that we have in the windows and then we have coming on this side. So what we'll do, we'll turn this off, we'll turn this one off. In the top view, we'll create a brand new light source, a square, a rectangle. So we'll create that. So turn off directionality. We don't want that. We're going to aim it. Now make sure nothing's being excluded, which is proper. All right. We got to turn it on. All right. So we have to make this a rounded off, very soft light source. So what we'll do is create another Corona bitmap, drag and drop it into another material slot, make sure it's an instance, and we will be loading the HDRI sphere. This is a rounded off sphere. You could also try the square, but we'll try the sphere first. And this is just a perfect circle that's very soft edge. So if you click on view, this is what it looks like. Now we're just going to uncheck visible. And now we're just going to reposition it on the backside, kind of like this shot, to get us this soft highlight. And then we could tone it down some. Adjust the scale properties of the light. So as you can see, we're getting that beautiful soft highlight in the windows, rolling around a little bit on the rear end to give us that rim light. Like so. Now, I don't want it to really fill the back, I don't think. Well, maybe we'll leave this one and let it affect the background, just so we get a little bit more of that light working with the light so it doesn't look completely faked. So that way we get some lighter tones in the shadow, but that is kind of distracting. So let's see what happens when we turn it off. All right, so that's what I'll do, is I am going to exclude the sidewall from this light as well. There we go. So we still have our contrast, but as you can see, now we're getting some of this beautiful rim light. Let's see. So his is also white light. So now what we'll do is in the top view with the light selected, hold Control press V. This is to copy the light. We'll just name it soft light, driver side. Now we'll just move this one over here and just rotate it around and just really scale it up like so. Make it larger like that. And then change this to 5, change it to 3. Let's see what we're looking like. So on Frederic's shot, it was not so much here as it is here, but I kind of like what we're getting here anyways. So again, we're not going to steal it 100%. We're just going to use what we can with the car we have. And this is how I was taught. The best way to learn about how to do these shots is to recreate things that are done very well. Again, I really admire Frederic's work, so I always use that as inspiration. So there we go. So now we have that beautiful soft light. We have that. We have the windows showing. We see the shape. We see the roll. We have the rim light separation. The only thing we don't have is any detail on the front. So what we'll do is two things. We'll try two things. We'll try the soft light, and then we might try the wet reflection light. So we'll copy this one, and we'll name it soft light front end. And now we'll just move this one all the way to the front, rotate it around like so, scale the light down some, and then move it down so we really get that front end of the car. And now change the intensity to 30, see what kind of results we get. So there we go. We're starting to see some details out of that front end. Not really getting much of a highlight or reflection effect. So what we might end up doing is creating two lights. So we'll do this one. I don't like that way of rotating. I always like to work on angles only. So we'll just move this one down. So there we go. So this way we're getting some of the rim light front end details like so. So as you can see, we're really capturing it right there. So and also if you don't want to see these annoying white boxes, you could turn on this wireframe mode right here. Click this, and this just makes it a wireframe as well. Very easy on the eyes. So what I'll do is go in and turn all these other lights off for now, just so I could see what each light is doing. And that's typically how I like to light things, is focus on one light at a time and then kind of turn them all back on. So this one's getting a little intense. So right there, now I'm going to do is Control V, copy that one, and then reposition it. Something like this. Turn on wireframe as well. On this one, we also want wireframe. The one thing you don't really want to do is have a light source coming from the same direction as the camera's perspective, because that's just going to flatten the whole car. And that's just kind of like photography 101. So if you're a photographer learning CGI, you already know this. So we're just going to kind of move it overhead. And also what I'll try to do is see what the square HDRI is going to do. So I'm just going to drag and drop this material over here. Just give it any kind of ASDF at the end so it's not the same name. And I'm going to load the gradient square, assign it to this, and see what we get in terms of reflections and highlights. So that's kind of what I want, is I want a little bit of a reflection highlight on the front end of the hood or the trunk, whatever you want to call it for this car. So there we go. Just get a little bit of a little lip occurring right there. All right, so now what we'll do is go back, click on Light Lister, and turn on all of our lights. All right, so this is what our current image is looking like, and this area is, to me, is dead. I would just like to show off that design element a little more. So what we will do is copy the light source, the soft one again, just drag it over here, and just kind of position it over the top of the car, kind of like an overhead softbox. And now just kind of move it so we're not really getting much of the windshield. I kind of like the drama we're getting there, but enough to show off these design elements of the car. All right, and then we'll probably make it a little not so long as wide. So there we go. Make this about a 1, so that's why it's not very dominant. All right, so now that we have that, what we want to do is add some of this environmental light. Again, this could be done in post. We'll just try to do it in CG and see what happens. So we'll create a disk light, create it on the side, place it behind the car. We're going to do targeted and aim it at our back wall, and then just make it like 500. Give us some directionality. 1.6. Whoops. place it closer to the back side of the car. Aim it kind of at the ground in front of the light. That way it rolls its way to the back. So we'll change this to 0.5. Nope, I don't like that. That's too much of a spread. So 1200. Now what we can try to do is raise the light source some more. And that's the beauty of CGI, is in real life you would see the back side of the hot light over here, but it's just invisible to us. So 0.55, 0.58. So there we go. 0.6. Just give it a little bit more oomph. All right. Now, the one thing we want to do is, and this is coming from photography, is you want to show the rim design or the wheel design, however you want to look at it. So what we'll do here is go into our wheels, click on all these layers by holding shift and just clicking, right click, go to select. Here in 3D Max, you have this thing called a selection set, and this is kind of like a favorites grouping without actually doing anything. So we'll just name this wheels. There we go. Now what we'll do is create a light source, a plane, a rectangle. So we are more or less creating a softbox now. No directionality. Make it about 50 watts, nothing too crazy. As you can see, now we're aiming it at the wheel. And we, again, like you would in real life, if you were to strobe the wheel, you would go in, you do that, then you mask it out, all that fun stuff. What we have the ability to do is, again, click on exclude, but now what we're going to do is select the wheels layer, click on this button to add them to the list, but this time we're going to click include. And now in just one shot, we're able to include that. So this allows us to have the wheels just isolated and add our little rim light, fill light to them without having to actually mask it out and do it in post later on. So we're just going to move this from the back side and give it more of that definition shape. Lower the intensity so it blends in a little better so it doesn't look out of place. Do Control V. Fill it on the rear wheel. There we go. All right. So now let's say you want to add a little bit of, again, this is where we just use our own creative liberty and do whatever we want. So you want to add a little bit of that red tail light glow, like if you were pressing the brake. So we'll do this rectangle, click on front, drag and drop a thin rectangle, recreate the idea of those lights. Now what we'll do is kind of change the top view to perspective by pressing P. So we'll place it here, kind of aim it a little bit of down direction. And this is just where we just fake things and have fun with it. So input, we're going to change this to red. Change the directionality to 0.4. Change this to 500. 0.3. 600. Now we're going to aim it up some. See what 0.7 does. 0.6. 0.5. All right, so that's feeling pretty good. We could actually make it a little longer too. Like so. Control V. Make sure, for this one you can actually do as an instance because they are the same lights. Because if you think about it, on the real car, the intensity of both of these lights is the same. If you turn it on, it's on. If you turn it off, it's off. So we could do an instance of these two. So there we go. So now we have a little bit of a rear end light. We could actually diffuse it even more. 0.4, 500. Desaturate the intensity of the red so it feels a little more natural and not just like a strong red glow. Now you could do the same thing to the front if you want. I will not be doing that. Now let's see what else we want to add. So we have that covered. So the one thing is when we're doing this final render, what I don't really want is the sidewall to be part of my alpha map. And the alpha map, if you think about it, kind of like a mask. I want to be able to just quickly have it mask itself out. So what I'll do is go to this material background. If you go to advanced settings, this whole alpha mode, default as black. Now our car is just already masked out for us automatically, alongside with all the alphas that we have created. Now, the other thing what you can do is add a little bit of wear and tear to the ground, just that studio floor. So we'll turn on reflection. So now, as you can see, we have a very, very wet reflective floor. We'll do something like a zero point 0.7, so that's feeling nice. Now, what we will do is go to our materials, scene materials, and remember the black diffused. We had that wear and tear map. So we're going to take that same exact concept and apply it to our studio floor. So we're just going to put in the glossiness. And now we probably have to bump up the scale quite a bit. So let's go to 5 feet. And then what I'll probably do is change it to dirty map contrast. So there we go. And then remember, whites are reflective, darks are not. So what we will probably want to do is bump this up like so. And then just add a little curve to it and open up the midtones. There we go. So there's that. And now what we'll do is more or less diffuse it evenly. So change this from 100 to 50. So this way we still get that wear and tear, but naturally we get a more evenly spread out diffusion. So maybe 30. And then we'll change the reflection color, something very dark. So that way it's only a hint of imperfection. It's not very dominant. And maybe we'll make this a 0.8 so we get more of a visible reflection, but we still get that wear and tear imperfection. So there we go. And so that in a nutshell is creating our base render. Now, the next step, what we will do, and I'll kind of experiment before making a tutorial about it, is trying to create that caustics that Frederic's image has, which is all these the shimmers. The problem is sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work properly. So I don't want to spin wheels and try to create a tutorial on something that I'm not sure will work well. But I know this right here is a good foundation to start retouching. Now I'll press F10. I'm gonna go over here to scene. For denoising, I'm going to change this to Corona high quality. Now for camera, I want to make sure bloom and glare is on. That's all the beautiful glows and pings and shimmers. That just makes it look cool. Everything else I believe is proper. Your final output is whatever you want it to be. Doesn't necessarily matter. So I'm just going to do a 6K just so I get a really nice high res render to retouch. And so now if I press stop, I'm going to save this just in case. And then what I'm going to do is just literally hit F9 to start the rendering process. And the way Corona works, it just works in passes. And it just keeps going over and over and over until you hit stop, where that means I like the results. And then it's just going to run through a little denoise process and you're done. So what that means is I'm hitting F9 now. And you're going to start these little dots appear. These dots are like your samples of the rendering. And all it does, if you look right here, is rendering initial pass. And then it's just going to say one of blah, 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 2, 3, 4, and it just keeps going and going and going. Now, in the scene tab, you could do a pass limit or you could do a noise limit. Read up on this on your own time. I don't want to nerd out on a tutorial and try to explain what this is, even though I probably won't even explain that properly. So there's some very good proper documents from Corona Render on how this works and how to use it to best of your ability, whatever. I don't really care to go into that. I'm trying to keep these tutorials very simple so you do more of the fun stuff versus the boring stuff like behind the scenes information. All right, so now as you can see, it's rendering past 2. That's going to go 3, 4, and this just continues going and going and going until you get the results you like. Now, if you could see, when we go to our alpha map, we have our car. And it even does these cool things like makes the windows semi-transparent. So if you want to add like a character back there, let's say you want to composite your own elements in the background of the studio, you could do that and it will work properly. And then we have our masks that we set up in the previous tutorial. So now we'll be able to go and adjust the tones of the tires, of the wheels, the carbon fiber, and then we can use the normals map to fine tune the highlights, and we'll kind of go through that in a little bit as well. So I'll do like a little breakdown of retouching CGI. I know all you guys know how to retouch. That's not an issue. The issue is some of these things that I'm rendering out on the CG end. is kind of like a new experience because I don't know how many people work with red, green, and blue alphas unless you're working with a CG artist. So with that said, this is just cooking away now. It's going to take some time. Let's say you want to really look at something without any grain. You could actually hit this region box and make a little region selection, and it's just going to focus on rendering just that little region. If you're like, oh, that's looking good, just hit cancel, and it keeps rendering the whole image. This is just telling it to like, hey, just lock in on this object just for right now and really get rid of the grain. So let's say you're doing a render and everything's looking good, but there's like a little bit of noise left in this one area, like the wheel, like right here, for instance, these little specks. You need to make a little region selection, and that's just gonna really focus on making sure this area is nice and high res. And as you can see, this is grainy, this is perfectly smooth. So I'm just gonna let this cook away, and then we'll do a different tutorial, part two to this one, on retouching a CGI studio render.